Hello viewers, welcome to MOOC's online course on Visual Perception and Art, a survey across the cultures. This is the 11th lecture, and today we shall be looking at the popular visual arts in the context of popular visual culture, of course, and how visual perception works there. Now, any kind of visual image that is part of our popular culture or mass culture can be identified as sign of popular visual culture. Film posters, for example, advertisement boards, shop decor, matchbox image, packaging design, book designs, cartoons, street visuals, everything that is shared by a huge mass of people in a given culture at a given point of time constitute what we call popular visual culture. And needless to say, it has a very important commercial aspect, particularly when we are looking at the publicity images, particularly when we are looking at commodities for sale, particularly when we are looking at all kinds of cultural products which are primarily meant to be sold to make a business. In fact, you can make an exhaustive list of the different categories of popular visual culture, and you will find that the list is never ending. We have mentioned just a very few examples here, but there are many more to be added, and you can do that yourself. That what are the different categories of visual art or visual culture that can be considered as a part of popular visual culture of a given society at a given point of time. And we often do not realize how our visual perceptions get affected by these innumerable glimpses of popular visual culture around us all the time. Not that we consciously develop a faculty to respond to popular visual art, not that we prepare ourselves consciously to deal or negotiate with popular visual culture, but in more often than not, in most cases, it happens automatically. It happens very normally in the normal process of our life activities, daily activities, and so on. So consciously or not so consciously, we all encounter these images, what we call popular visual images. We negotiate them, and we watch and wonder how the social environment too gets affected by them. Because it is something that we don't need to practice. It is something that seeps in, something that we get habituated with. So eventually we acquire that kind of visual perception, that very special kind of visual perception, I would say, that enables us to respond to such visual culture and interpret them appropriately. Yes, once again, the factor of interpretation is very important here too, because popular visual culture often appears in a coded way. It looks like a visual code which we are supposed to decode and interpret. We are supposed to make some meaning out of it, whether it is an advertisement board or a publicity image or a kind of sign, a social sign meant for the public, maybe a traffic signal, maybe a beautiful packaging design of a commodity to attract the customers. Nothing is self-explanatory. We need to explain these things ourselves, and it happens very fast, it happens very smoothly, even without our knowledge. And if we are talking about the context of the popular visual culture, of course there is a social context, there is a cultural context, there is also an industrial context, there is a business context, that is a commercial context, but at the same time, physically speaking, there are some physical contexts. For example, when you are looking at an advertisement, a publicity image on the page of a popular magazine, then the magazine in the context. When you are looking at a huge advertisement billboard right at some intersection of a very busy street of a metropolis, then that city or that junction is the locational context of that popular visual. In some cases where we frequent quite often the marketplace, the shopping mall, the shopping arcade is the physical context for a number of images and visuals which form a significant part of popular visual culture of a market or a shopping mall or a shopping arcade. So, store interiors, public posters, though we get habituated with them in the urban life, are not so easy to interpret and make a sense out of them. We get habituated, we get used to it, not that somebody comes and teaches us how to look at them, like the way we are taught how to look at art, like the way we are taught how to interpret Ajanta painting or a painting by Michelangelo. Nobody comes and teaches us how to interpret a work of advertisement or a publicity images. If somebody has to do that, then rest assured that particular advertisement image is a failure, because it is supposed to convey the message very fast to the consumer, to the viewer, to the client, without the need of any kind of intervention on part of anybody else. So, the visual perception with which we are supposed to make a meaning out of these popular visual imageries is supposed to be there, or it's supposed to be acquired by us very fast and perhaps unconsciously. So, we need to adopt to a different kind of visual perception. The kind of visual perception with which we are generally used to in our daily life, in our painting, in other forms of art, will not be very suitable to understand the popular visual images. For example, when you look at a shop selling utensils, stainless steel utensils like this one, even in order to measure, even in order to get some sense what kind of objects he is selling, we need to adjust our eyes, because the plenitude that we come across in this kind of situations is rather baffling. It is rather confusing at times. So, we need to have a very sharp visual perception with which we will be able to make out when we are in front of a shop what this shop contains, what are the different objects. Then we are supposed to in fact exercise our choice as a customer. So, a plenty of different kinds of arrangements in different kinds of shops are there available, particularly in a country like India, where the shopping arrangement is still not standardized, unless and until you go to a shopping mall where you see the arrangement of the products, the arrangement of the commodities is generally very standardized, and as a result almost all the shopping malls across India look the same. But if you are looking at the street shops, if you are looking at the independent markets and their shops, you will find that the standardization is less. Individual, independent idea of arranging, beautifying, decorating a shop is more. So, it is in this case that you find each and every shop has a different decor, has a different kind of visual appeal, which implies that to interpret or make sense out of these different kinds of shops, we need to have different kinds of visual perception. We need to have different kinds of visual tools to interpret them, to understand them. Just one kind of sensibility will not be sufficient to interpret and see and make sense of all these different kinds of shops. But as far as the shopping mall is concerned, one single kind of visual perception or visual sensibility is enough to go and move around freely and interpret all the shopping malls across India and perhaps across globe. But when you are looking at this kind of street shops like this one or this one, everything right from the kind of stuffs that you see here, the commodities, the objects, the arrangement is unique from one shop to another shop. So, unique visual perceptions or visual sensibilities are needed on part of the customers to make sense of these shops. Or this one. In fact, as a visual artist or as somebody who has a deep interest in visual arts can actually do a survey from shop to shop, particularly street shops, and make a study of how shop objects or objects and commodities in a shop are arranged differently one from the other. And also every city has its own unique way of arranging and decorating the shops. So, shop culture is also unique in the context of India. I mean, the way a vegetable shop is arranged and decorated in a city like Mumbai will be very different from the way it is arranged in a city like Kolkata or in a city like Chennai or Bangalore. But with the advent of this idea of shopping mall, these variations of visual culture is reducing. We are missing out on these variations. We are getting used to a very standard popular visual culture which is same in every shopping mall. But if you are looking at the street shops, it is not the same. There are different ways of promoting your objects. There are different ways of arranging them so as to attract the consumers towards your objects and commodities and ensure that they buy your stuffs. All these things, these methods are very cultural. They are locally thought about. There is no universal standard rule like they have in shopping malls. Even simple things like this will have a slightly different kind of arrangement. And the very choice that all these beads are kept in yellow bowls also give you a sense of decoration. And where did this particular seller, who is a street vendor, as you can see, where did he or she get this idea from? What kind of visual perception drove the seller towards this kind of idea that he or she would select just one single color, in this case it is yellow, and all the bowls, all the containers are yellow colored of varying shapes, and all the stuffs and beads are kept in yellow colored bowls, and the bowls are obviously different, the containers are very different. So, this is very interesting also, that when you look at these popular visual cultures in the street shops, street markets, then it is also interesting to realize that almost each and every seller is an artist in his or her own right. Everybody exercises a sense of artistic ability to decorate their shop, to arrange their stuffs in a way that they become visually attractive, because that is the main point. They have to make their objects visual and the arrangement visually attractive. And depending on the objects, either you keep them on the floor or you hang them vertically or you keep them differently. One more like that. So, we are looking at different kinds of street shops and street vendors who keep and decorate their shops, but we need to remember it's a very temporary arrangement. Every day they need to pack up and come back next day and arrange the objects once again the way it was the day before. So, it is a practice that they have to do on daily basis. It is not a kind of permanent shop where you keep and arrange your stuffs permanently for a long time unless you decide to change it once again. But here there is no option but to rearrange it every day, every morning. So, it is almost like a ritualistic practice that these sellers go through every day. Or this one, and look at this one, the way this parrots, these toy parrots have been stitched, attached to each other, and they are all hanging from a pole, but the way they are all made to hang, it almost looks like they are so lively, they are so chirping. Even the hanging, their positions is not very uniform, and this very absence of uniformity also makes his stuffs very attractive. One more topi seller, a hat seller. Then when a street vendor cannot find a space enough on the ground, he chooses to use this particular portion of a boundary wall, very narrow length, and he keeps his wooden owls over there. So, this is also interesting about this kind of popular and local markets who do not have a permanent shop or structure. They utilize the available spaces and create makeshift shops. Now, this requires a very flexible visual perception to adjust to these changes, because if you have a fixed perception, if you have only one singular thought or concept of displaying your objects, then you will not be able to adjust to this slight but very significant changes. In order to accommodate the different kinds of display strategies, this kind of sellers are very open to ideas. Or look at this one, how one keeps different kinds of fruits in a shop which is semi-permanent. I mean, it is permanent, but it does not have a very permanent structure. Hence, every night the seller has to empty his shop, pick up all the fruits and put them back into boxes and unpack them again next morning and display it again, either the way it was the morning the day before or maybe in a new way. So, along besides selling the object, this everyday activity is very important for this street shops having very temporary kind of arrangements. But when we are looking at something like a shopping mall, everything is very permanent, very concrete, and hence the display of the commodities are also very permanent, in the sense that one does not have to display them and arrange and rearrange them every day. Now, without our conscious knowledge, we are engaged in continuous interpretations of popular visual culture, as I have already said. It is a part of our effort to understand the socio-cultural environment around. It is not an individual activity. It is a part of a larger social collective activity. Thousands of other people are doing the same all the time. Now, this I think is a very vital issue, that the kind of visual perception we are talking about in the context of popular visual culture is not something that is very individual, it is collective. I mean, the entire community, whom we call consumer in this case, the clients or the customers, the entire community is sharing a similar visual sensibility or perception in order to interpret and make sense of what is being shown to them, what they are encountering every day, whether it is a shopping mall or a street shop or other forms of visual culture, popular visual culture that we encounter every day. So, from a tiny matchbox to a consumer packaging to a huge billboard, we tend to interpret them all the time, and we do that once again collectively. Not that I am always doing with few more people with me, even if we are doing at different points of time, but we are all doing it almost with the same purpose of making some sense. Thereby, we practice a certain visual perception as a part of our daily survival. So, popular visual imageries or popular visual culture, let us say, it almost compels us. It makes it mandatory for us to practice a certain kind of visual perception, if not for anything else, at least for our daily survival. This is a very famous packaging which we all interpret, see, enjoy, and perhaps begin to like it. So, we develop a kind of liking which may vary. You may like this packaging, somebody else may like something else, but it is the packaging also that we like along with the content of the packet. So, in a visual cultural setting like this inside a shopping mall, we exercise certain kinds of visual sensibilities and visual power or visual idea to interpret right from inside or outside. Everywhere we do that, otherwise we will not be able to grasp the situation, we will be lost. So, the sensibility or the visual perception we are talking about in the context of popular visual culture is not merely about only the visual we are talking about, it is also about the context, the physical context within which we find them. Even in a fair, in a popular mela or fair, when we encounter this kind of rides, which are called rides, coming in different forms, we always choose, or kind of our kids also always choose that they like this dragon or they like something else. Now, these are all primarily made to attract the customer, and the whole point is the amount of variations they go through in order to attract the customer. In many places, and particularly in Bengal, during Durga Puja, we have a huge number of temporary temple structures which are called mandapas or puja pandals, which also add to the vibrant popular visual culture of a particular community. And when you look at them, something like this, it almost gives you a sense of permanency, which it is not only after 6-7 days, they are pulled down, they are dismantled, and the place where it was becomes empty. So, why I am bringing up this example is to raise another very important point, that there are many examples of popular visual culture, like there are many examples of folk art where the objects are very, very temporary. Now, it is this ephemeral quality that also adds to the character of popular visual culture. People carry a lot of these ideas of popular visual culture in their memory rather than as permanent objects, like this puja pandals. Now, beside these things, these street shops or shopping malls or various kinds of other products or puja pandals, a couple of things that is really popular and we are very much familiar with everywhere is, for instance, film posters. Now, to interpret popular visuals like a film or advertisement poster, or a cartoon for that matter requires some amount of intelligent involvement also. It cannot be done purely visually. You need to also, because you see all these things like a packaging or an advertisement or a poster or a film poster, they also involve what we call text. So, it is important that you can read the text, and it is also important that you connect the text with the given visual. So, film posters form a very important part of our popular visual culture, and it influences our visual sensibilities to a great deal. So, even if you have not watched the film, you can always begin to guess or imagine the content of the film by looking at the poster itself, and that is why film poster is very, very important. It is supposed to attract you not only by the appearance of the stars, very glamorous stars who are featured on the posters, but also by the fact that a poster should be designed in a way that it should be able to very quickly convey the content of the poster, that is the content of the film, and that attracts you. Of course, you have pre-reviews, you have trailers on YouTube nowadays, but still a poster, and particularly in the pre-internet era, poster actually was very, very important, not only as a part of popular visual culture, but also as an agent which was invested with a huge task of creating the market of a film even before it was released. And poster making or poster designing is such a beautiful and a creative category that if you go through even 20 to 25 film posters of any country, you will be amazed to see the variety of ideas, the variety of aesthetics, the variety of designings that they employ, the designers employ in order to make these film posters. And film posters as popular visual art is also a reflection of the particular society or particular culture. Looking at this particular film poster of Mother India, even if you do not know when this film was made, just by looking at the poster, even if you are not familiar with the names of the stars featuring in this film and it is written on the top, still just by looking at the poster, by looking at the figure, by looking at the color, you can make out that this film has to be an old film. Now, what makes you think so? Ask yourself, you will have the answer. Then we have, of course, different kinds of visuals which are not directly posters, but publicity images. Now, it is all about writing, text, letter. It is about, like as the text says in this particular visual, if you really want to touch someone, send them a letter. So, this poster is supposedly encouraging people to write handwritten letters and send. So, it is through letters, it is through writing, through manual handwritten letters, you are able to touch somebody. So, it is basically enhancing and promoting this human quality of letter writing, which has almost become a passé in the age of email and messages. Now, you have to read the poster, the text of course, and of course more than that you have to read the visual. Now, it is not very difficult for common people to get the message that is being conveyed, because it is not a very complex painting by Picasso or Michelangelo. They had different objects. Here any good poster will primarily be able to convey the message. For example, this one, a poster of a coffee brand, and how they turned the Z, which originally signifies that you are sleepy, to N, which signifies a particular brand name of a coffee. It is nothing but text, but it also has a very strong visual configuration. So, that needs a kind of sophisticated visual perception to understand the character, the content, and also the language of this publicity poster. And then lastly, we have something that we call cartoon. Now, this is a cartoon, or for that matter for any cartoon, we quickly want to read the text, the caption. So, please read this text. Unless you know Chinese, unless you are able to follow Chinese, you won't be able to read what is written there because it's written in Chinese. But what I'm trying to say is, will you be able to read, let us say read this cartoon in spite of the fact that you do not follow Chinese? I mean, straight away, do you get any idea from the visual? So, hold on, look at the drawing and try to get the meaning directly from the drawing. If we can make many guesses, but if you feel desperate to know what is written over there, we have an English version of the same cartoon, where it is said that the school teacher father is saying that, why haven't you gone to bed yet? And the schoolboy son replies back, why haven't you? Because the schoolboy, it's midnight and he is still writing papers or finishing his homework, whereas his school teacher father it's midnight and he is still yet to finish a whole lot of exam papers tomorrow. So, they are both in the same soup because of the tremendous pressure of school education in a country like China in 1960s. This is a cartoon that was drawn in 1964. Now, it is true that the text gives us a clue about the content of the cartoon, but I guess even when there is no text, still we can make some attempt. For example, this one. This cartoon does not have any text, but you are supposed to make the meaning of this cartoon just by looking at the visuals. And popular visual culture, really speaking, often has this power to make people understand the visual directly. It is that kind of visual perception we are talking about today. And then you have finally human body itself, who carries certain signs of popular visual culture through very trendy dress, fashionable attire and accessories like this one. So, when the body itself becomes the carrier of the popular culture, we get a different kind of popular visual, either as a fashion statement or a trendy style like this, or as a ritualistic performance by rural people who are dressed up either as a skeleton or as an elephant or as some kind of mythical animal, mainly to beg money, but they also they transform themselves. It is their body, their dress, everything into an imagery which is a part of a popular visual culture. And finally, this one, where a young girl, she transforms herself into the goddess of Kali and she roams around. So, from society to urban space to various kinds of cultural spaces and also to the body itself, popular visual culture can be found everywhere, right from our kitchen to the street out there, right from a very interior rural community to an ultra modern urban center as well. Thank you.